going to start with a photograph of him. Doesn't look very revolutionary. In fact, he looks as though he is just a member of the middle classes, one of the dreaded bourgeoisie, out in the Model T Ford, except when you look at it, it's a sunny day. There he is. This is Klucis here. I'm going to use my finger in case I do something dire with this. This is Klucis beaming out the summer of 1918 in the Kremlin in Lenin's Model T Ford. I never knew Lenin had a Model T Ford. It's something, you know, you learn something every day. But it doesn't look like a revolutionary. He doesn't look like a revolutionary. You can tell from this photograph that he was slightly privileged. He's in the Kremlin. He's in Lenin's car. So he's attached to the Bolsheviks. But you get no idea from this that he was actually a member of the Red Rifles, the Latvian Red Rifles, which fought very fiercely in defense of the revolution, who fought in Moscow. And this is a kind of collage which he made very early on in a sort of cubist idiom. And you can see up here you can see the fragmented face of Nicholas, the Tsar. And here you have, I don't think a Red Rifleman, but here you have the dreaded bourgeoisie. And this is the artillery weapons of the Latvian Red Rifle Regiment. He was a member of that regiment. He fought for the revolution. He was a card-carrying member of the Bolshevik Party. He was a firm communist, and this is manifest throughout his work. And those of you who don't really know much about Klucis will be familiar with this kind of poster, the posters which he produced at the end of the 1930s in defense of the first five-year plan, also celebrating Lenin and, behind him, the eminence grise of Stalin. In a way, what he did was stamp Stalin with the, if you like, the prestige and also the validity. He made him, he gave him authenticity, legitimacy by making him, if you like, in the shadow of Lenin. But in between the Red Latvian Rifles and these works of the late 20s, Klucis produced a painting which for me is one of the great paintings of the Russian avant-garde. It's Dynamic City, which is in Thessaloniki. It's a wonderful painting, and it expresses to me his desire for a new world, a new world. And I think that what I see throughout Klucis's work is this commitment, this aspiration towards realizing the revolution, creating a new revolutionary utopia, a commitment to communism, a commitment to the Communist Party. Right or wrong, it's the way forward. And I want to actually express this and look at this kind of sense of continuity in his work and the way this commitment expressed itself even in quite really what looks like a completely abstract painting, a kind of circle with kind of rectangular elements, quadrilaterals upon it. And I want to argue that this is in fact an image of a communist utopia and in a sense a springboard for his later more kind of, if you like, materializations of that utopia in transmitting the revolutionary message, transmitting the aspiration towards utopia through his agitational projects. Which start really in 1922 with Quake Bourgeois. He might have looked bourgeois in his 1918, summer 1918 car, but by 1922 he's saying Quake Bourgeois, long live the proletarians. And this is a decorative design for the Congress of the Comintern. It was the 4th Congress of the Comintern and the 5th anniversary of the Revolution, 1922, and he's transformed the Kremlin into this extraordinary abstract structure, away from the towers of totalitarianism towards, if you like, this new dynamic radio technology, aeroplanes. We talked a lot about aeroplanes today, and we see aviation there. Radio, aviation, technology leading the way to the future. Long live the proletarian. And the 5th, this is 5 because it's the 5th anniversary of the revolution. And the sun, the dawn of the new world, is here. He said, after my abstract period, which ended in 1920-1, the line of my further development is the line of development of agitational mass art. What I want to suggest is that that isn't a kind of abrupt break, but on the contrary, that Klucis went from this onwards, and in a sense, all his work as an artist was imbued with this spirit of utopian aspiration, of belief and fervent belief in communism. He said, I am building a reality that does not exist yet, in 1921. And this is his dynamic city. It's mixed media, sound and concrete, on a board. It's an abstract image, a circular form with these almost transparent and translucent, these kind of different weights and kind of densities of colour and tone going across it, almost as if the world is denoted by the globe, the circle, and this is the new structure of the world coming upon it. And in this sense, we see a continuity the dynamic city kind of powering through space, coming to us from the future. We see it related to Kazimir Maliewicz's suprematism, to paintings like this of 1917, in which we get a sense of the cosmos, of the potential of space, our aspiration towards space, an aspiration which we see in other works of the period as well, not least in the works surrounding us. Now, what's interesting about Dynamic City is it is constructed as an icon. It is built, it is painted upon an icon board. This isn't because he couldn't find anything else to paint on, although, you know, the shortages of the Civil War didn't make painting materials easy to locate. But it's almost as though he, an atheist, because he's a communist, but also probably not a Russian Orthodox by a religion and upbringing, probably Protestant Lutheran, because that was what Latvians tended to be. He has taken the kind of concept of the icon, materialized it. And it seems to me that this is a painting as an icon of communism. And I'm showing Theophan Greg's Our Lady of the Dawn. Because it seems to me when we see this, we can see that what he's exploring here is the sense of the icon as a materialization of a spiritual world, the materialization of a Neoplatonic ideal. And in this sense, he's presenting us with an image of the new world, an image of the communist reality. Now, the idea of the painting as icon, of course, again goes back to his mentor at this point, Kazimir Malevich. Malevich described the black square, which is here, as the icon of my time, and he presented it in 1915, as you see here, or the end of 1915, early 1916, across the corners of the room in the position traditionally occupied by the icon in the Russian Orthodox home. This sense of a Neoplatonic communist reality, a sense of going towards something, realizing, harnessing the power of the spiritual towards the materialization of the present, we can also see in his relationship to the work of Vladimir Tatlin. I feel that Klucis kind of bridges the gap between suprematism and constructivism. Like Tatlin's 1915 and 16 constructions, which were also exhibited at the 010 exhibition alongside Malevich's suprematist work, we get the sense of flight. One of the critics at the time actually saw the work up here, the corner Canterbury. He said it's like a plane in flight. And that was a commentator, not particularly favourable commentator on Russian avant-garde, the Russian avant-garde exhibition. Again here, this sense of tonality, this sense of materializing space, of making the viewer experience space. Klucis is describing a new space, a new kind of structure, just as, if you like, Tatlin is exploring that in new materials. Now, Dynamic City isn't the only painting that he produced at this time. He also produced axonometric painting, which in some ways is much more conventional because it isn't painted on an icon board, which again makes one see even more perhaps acutely what the function of the icon board was, that it was to, if you like, say this is a new truth. This replaces the old religion. This is a new belief system. It's a new kind of way of looking at the world and seeing reality. And this is painted much more conventionally. It seems to be inspired directly again by Malevich. These are little kind of drawings which were reproduced in Suprematism 24 drawings, which was printed in Vitos in 1920. And the original orientation, then I've rotated it, in a sense to show the affinity with Klucis's work. Now, Klucis, of course, actually explored dynamic city. He didn't just paint the painting and hang it up. He actually explored its potential. He materialized it in a very deliberate way in this photomontage and it's very difficult to say, but it's probably around 1921, where he puts in actual kind of images of material construction, techniques, actual buildings, people on these axes, emphasizing, if you like, the relationship of the image to material reality, to the reality in which everybody is living at the time. And he explored it in other ways. This is a photograph that he took of his photomontage, which is in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and this is another construction. Very much, if you like, exploring the potential and going further with the potential of dynamic city in the same way. And he used it for a very important poster, the electrification of the entire country. This, in a sense, announced and promoted Lenin's policy of electrification of Russia. I love this story that when Lenin actually demonstrated in front of the committee his plan for electrifying Russia, he had a thing which then kind of blew out all the lights in Moscow when it blew it. And in a way, that in a sense epitomizes the scale of the task in front of him. So yes, he really needed to be larger than life and walking over the new world. It's the new world epitomized by Lenin as the ideological, the leader who will bring Russia screaming into the modern world, if you like, and the modern world of an egalitarian communist regime. And again, if you like, it's the dynamic city which provides the foundation for this. So the electrification of Russia is a way of, if you like, realizing the communist dream, and indeed that's Klucis's dream. Now, in early 1921, Tatlin's tower went on display in Moscow, and Tatlin produced a statement, The Work Ahead of Us, at the same time, calling upon artists to kind of engage with everyday life, to use their artistic skills to create new objects for reality. And it's around this time, and we don't know precisely when, that Klucis began to make these wonderful three-dimensional constructions based on the experience of Tatlin, but also based on seeing, and he almost certainly saw, because he was friendly, we know he was friendly with Carl Jorgensen, who actually exhibited in this work, was a member of the first working group of constructivists. He saw this exhibition of work by the constructivist group in Moscow in May 1921. And these are these wonderful constructions made from rods in which space, the parameters of space are defined. Space isn't enclosed. The forms are part of a fluid spatial continuum. And these are works by Jorgensen. These are works by Rodchenko, which we see here, materialized across the centuries to us, a century, almost a century, and the work. This is a display within an exhibition of Mahu, the Society of Young Artists. And it's almost certain that, as I said, because he was so friendly with Jorgensen, who was in the car, Lenin's car, you know, it's an intimate moment to share. And because of this, we know we almost certainly saw the exhibition. And he began, either before this or subsequently, to create a series of constructions which we only know from photographs. So this is one here which has, if you like, a strong architectural resonance. It's almost as though part of the dynamic city has been reconstructed in terms of rods and a three-dimensional construction. And this, again, it seems to be related to dynamic city in the sense that this kind of rectangular entity in the middle radiates outwards, that this form can generate energy beyond itself. He also made works which are very different to the kind of works he would have seen at the Constructivist exhibition. This kind of standing exhibition, this hanging exhibition, this standing construction and this hanging construction. And these are very different, but he's again using mathematical forms, like forms here. These seem to be about the same size. These, of course, seem to be either ellipses or circles, which he then has kind of, which it probably made like these circles here. And then kind of not rotated within each other, as Rodchenko had done, but actually, if you like, locked within each other and kind of cascading down, or if you like, growing up the wall. It seems to me that they have both movements within this, whereas this is striding outwards from the wall. Of course, unlike Rodchenko's, they could actually collapse without having to be taken apart. So that made them a bit more portable for exhibition purposes. And here's the Rodchenko, but we don't need it because we've got Henry's wonderful reconstruction here, which we can appreciate in real three-dimensionality. So we come to 1922, and suddenly he stops making these constructions, and he emphasizes that he's moving on to the plan of real works, that this kind of abstract period is behind him, and we have this confection of different allusions here, aviation, radio, although here again we have a kind of resonance back, if you like, to the dynamic city. And it's in 1922, alongside this sort of decorative schema, that he develops these plans, these designs, these drawings for radio orators. Now, I know that they're going to be talked about by my colleague in the subsequent paper, so I'm not going to go into much detail here. What I do want to emphasize, however, is how they grow out of his own experimental work with real materials. So that it seems to me that here, this massing of the rods to create a dense construction we have here, whereas we also have a repetition of these, or a reiteration of this open work framing construction which holds it. So in a sense we have both the closely packed rods and the wide open skeletal construction which we see here. And this of course is a wonderful, it has a design for a screen, a speaker's platform, bookshelves for pamphlets, but also this screen here, which I think must have put posters or something on. So it's a kind of multi-propaganda kind of, it's a kind of, it is what, you know, one-man band is to music. This is a kind of one kind of entity, propaganda, sort of, I don't know, shop, media. It's a media kind of presentation, kind of obviously intended to be large. So, you know, quite difficult, you know, you have to have a person standing up here. So this was obviously intended to be quite an enormous construction. And it's taken not only inspiration from his own work, but also inspiration from the other artists with whom he probably was acquainted, or certainly whose work he knew from the Ottmacher exhibition. This is Georgi Stenberg's work, Construction of a Spatial Structure, sometimes known as KPS on the Russian. And here you can see this sense of slatted forms, this sense of a dynamic construction moving outwards, and the way these stands with these wires, and he's used wires here not only for rotating things, but also for keeping things, to giving them stability. And of course this is also Carl Jurgensen, his fellow Latvian, who was a kind of engineer, who also, if you like, is dealing with the articulation of three-dimensional entities from rod-like forms, or little, and usually like rod forms, and identical components, a sense of permutations within very limited, identical kind of means. We have this construction, which was a stand to celebrate the anniversary of the revolution, which again, in this element here, reiterates both the kinds of configurations we see in axonometric painting and in and in Dynamic City. And it's as though this is now growing downwards from the globe. Workers of the world unite, and clearly that's, although my Chinese isn't up to it, and that's how, I hope that's what the Chinese says as well. But it's intended to kind of, if you like, be a beacon, a promise, a kind of summons to come and join the revolution. And he has these radio orators. Obviously, you know, it wasn't enough to just have a real person. You had to have something that was going to be constant. The gramophone, not for jazz, although one would hope that one might have a bit of jazz or something. But no, I think these are Lenin's speeches. It's sometimes called Rечь Ленина, Lenin's speech. This is number 7, and with the cross kind of bass, and then these wires, and radio orator kind of obviously spun round. So if you didn't hear the voice, you might be attracted by the spinning element. And again, this kind of reference to the kind of structures that you would have seen at the Ogmahu exhibition of spring 1921. And I've chosen this one, Radio Orator number 4, and it's this kind of cross-section which you find in this Vladimir Stenberg construction of 1921, as well as in Georgi Stenberg. So there we have different configurations. But this sense of struts and wires used as tensile supports is very much a part of this whole, if you like, visual language of abstract constructions, which is then applied to this very strong utilitarian purpose of transmitting the revolution. And here we have a project for an agitational stand, which was clearly, it seems to me, a sort of poster stand and could be easily collapsed, transported, placed anywhere. And I'm not quite sure what scale this was on. I suspect the sort of small single orator stands were quite small. This could be at any scale at all. And this sense of reiteration of elements clearly goes back to Georgi Stenberg, but he also, it seems to me, recalls his own work with constructions, the hanging and standing constructions of about 1920-21. And here we see the rectangles are bigger than here, but they're standing up in a similar way, but they diminish or increase in size, depending on where you start, like the hanging construction. So there is a continuity, a sense that the material kind of experiments were important. And here's an unfinished drawing for a kiosk, in which we have this sort of red sun, which is back on the decorative scheme of the of Kremlin, the Red Square, and sort of elements of the poster stand as well as the book stand here. And this, of course, this wonderful Workers of the World Unite, World Unite, obviously more Germanic than English in his kind of background. And again, this sense of the repetition of forms, this sense of creating a visual arresting entity from these works. And this is a model of Klucis, a radio announcer number 3. Here we have Rечь Lenina. This is said to be, by the Museum of Modern Art, by Klucis. It's almost certainly a late model made by someone else. But again, we see the way the forms interact. It's very strongly connected with these kind of formal experiments. And of course, this has a resonance. When Rodchenko does his Workers' Club for 1925, we see book stands like this. We see this kind of screen construction. And I'm showing you so that you can see that I'm not lying. You might think I'm making it all up. And here we have, again, a sort of concertina element. That sense that we saw in the Jorgensen. So Klucis's work wasn't just kind of something out in the blue, although in fact we only know that one of these stands was actually made in 1922. And that was on top of the hotel where the delegates to the 4th Congress of the Comintern were actually staying. And I've always mean when I go to Moscow to make a photograph of where it stood and kind of make a photo montage, but I always forget, I'm always so busy. So anyway, he continues to make stands within the Futemas where he works, and this is his design for the stand, and here he is. Klucis himself, looking less bourgeois than he did in Lenin's automobile. But again, we see this sense of how he's using, this is the basic course, and the sense of colour and form going back to basics, which was the foundation of the Futemas, the higher artistic and educational, higher artistic and technical workshops, which is really the Moscow or Russian equivalent of the Bauhaus. And we see, in a way, this continuity between his work for the early 1922 works and later works. This is a showcase, in fact, devised for porcelain, which he designed for Brussels, a display of Soviet art in Brussels in 1928. This commitment to the revolution then found itself completely kind of repeated in the late posters of the 1920s. The Futemas, after 1925, there was very limited potential for realizing progressive, constructivist design. People had enough of austerity. They didn't want these kind of stripped back skeletal structures. They wanted something cozy and comfortable. They'd had enough of being uncomfortable. And constructivist design wasn't actually appreciated in sort of everyday life. Moreover, the government was very much firmly wanted a sort of propaganda, it wanted realistic images. And the constructivists, including Klucis, embraced photography as a means of continuing their allegiance to the revolution, continuing their allegiance to avant-garde ideas, but also kind of, if you like, embracing the figurative. And Klucis, in his last works, used the photograph to convey the constructivist message, convey the communist message. Here is, they're playing tennis. You might not feel that tennis is very communist, but it's the idea of the new man, the sports, fit, healthy, sporty, you know, very important. The new Soviet man and woman had to be very fit. And here we will repay the cold debt to the country, this sense of the workers, the determination of the workers. And these are all first five-year plan posters, inspiring. And this is, if you like, the last expression of Klucis's commitment to the revolution, the commitment to wherever it's going, to the communist utopia. Female workers and male workers, all to the election of the Soviets. And the USSR is the fighting brigade of the proletariat of the entire world. These are inspiring images which were produced in numerous large editions. And this, of course, is Stalin, continuing the work of Stalin, still as of Lenin, still as an eminence grise. But in a way, it's like another kind of icon. And what I would like to end with is to say, this continuity, this sense of the dynamic city as an icon of communism, as an icon of a new world, as an icon of utopia, is perhaps continued here in this turmoil and kind of horror of Stalinism, which we know now, but which at the time, for Klucis, seemed to be that technology and the first five-year plan seemed to be the way in which communism would be realized. Thank you.